long before man could imitate the flight of birds, he was absorbed by another goal, so slow and difficult that it would take millenniums to reach: the supremacy of the sea. Hollowed-out tree trunks, inflated skins, and bamboo or papyrus rafts served as first vehicles on the long journey through time, during which he accumulated knowledge and techniques that he used to broaden the frontiers of the known world. It was this constant search of the unknown, of riches and fortunes, and why not, of romantic adventure, that drove a particular being in a given historical moment to find himself prepared for the biggest leap of all: the conquest of the ocean. And it was the 12th day of the month of May of the year 1492, on a Saturday, when I came to Villa de Palos, which is a seaport, where I equipped 3 ships quite apt for the deed, and set sail from that very port, well supplied with much provisions and many seafarers. Villa de Palos, 3 ships, seafarer, Villa de Palos, 3 ships, seafarer, Villa de Palos, 3 ships.
Here and now, we the caravels navigating towards this new destination at the expense of these waters that saw our birth and growth and made us participants, essence of this strange and new world, in the most famous exploit ever told. Why? You ask why it was we, lost in this corner of the world, who went in search of the Indies? Well, let it be known that having been built to navigate as far as the eye can see, we were never overshadowed by Mediterranean galleys or Chinese junks, and although for centuries we have been considered strange and not pure, there has never been such renown for any ship as which by fortune we found for ourselves in the most glorious and famous voyage in history, the Great Discovery. Do not think that that memorable event was the work of capricious destiny or of individual genius. On the contrary, they were unhurried times, and of means, and above all of men who were willing and capable, and Portugal and Castile had them. 2 kingdoms with 2 territories in the south, politically different, but joined by the Portuguese Sea of Algarve and Castilian Andalusia. Since ancient times, seamen from both sides of the Guadiana have shared knowledge and activities in the ocean that united them. Mid-Christian 15th century, the Prince of Portugal, Don Enrique, known as the Navigator, gathered a group of wise cosmographers and pilots from all over the world in Sagres, turning that small location in the Iberian south into an extraordinary school for the investigation of cartography and navigation. It is not strange, then, that shortly before the end of the century there appeared a Genoese citizen, merchant by profession, although of seafaring vocation, calling himself Cristoforo Colombo and claiming to know the route to the east by way of the west. That man, tall of build, elongated face and aquiline nose, came into history to offer it the piece it was still missing. But his principal proofs, the maps of Bijain and Toscanelli, as well as some exotic goods dragged in by the sea, were not sufficient enough to convince the incredulous and suspicious European monarchies. and thus Christopher Columbus arrived to the lands of the county of Niebla with the immeasurable help of the Franciscan monks of La Rábida, and ended up on the subtle lap of the Queen of Castile, Doña Isabella, who at the time was culminating her military campaign against the Moor of Granada. And it was thanks to the mediation and good offices of a Jewish treasurer, Luis de Santangel, about mid-1492, that this man in his 40s found himself immersed in the most amazing project ever dreamed. Navigating across tenebrous seas, he would arrive at the lands previously visited by Marco Polo, the magical Cathay and the golden Cipango.
It was at that time that we met the regally named Admiral of the Ocean Sea, who came upon Villa de Palos, place that he knew well, as he knew of its people and what they knew of us, the Caravels. Although the port was small, it opened to the ocean that interested him. The men from the Villa de Palos were considered the most daring and efficient seafarers in the Canary African adventures, in which Andalusians and Lusitanians competed, the latter being our ancestors. Due to lawsuits with the Crown, Villa de Palos was obliged to compensate the expeditionary flotilla with 2 caravels and some provisions. And this is how the Santa Clara, called the Niña, and I, the Pinta, along with our proprietors Cristobal Quintero and Juan Niño de Moguer, found ourselves involved in such a laborious matter. The Admiral, although lacking open sea experience, had navigated sufficiently to know of our worth. We were, shall we say, the jewels of navigation at that magnificent moment. Infinite calculations and designs prompted the carpenters of Rivera to come upon our ideal shape. A long and slender hull with little draft and a very large surface for battle with 3 masts gave us the speed and autonomy necessary for long crossings, with a tall and graceful keel on the prow, square mainsails for the mainmasts and foremasts, lateen sails on the mizzen and foresail on the bowsprit made us unsurpassable in sailing close hauled. But our small size limited the crew's dietary possibilities and shelter in the storms. 60 tons was about all that was allowed in the midship frame that squeezed our wooden bellies. Without a doubt, they were you, the Caravels, the true queens of the ocean. To the west with the Spanish and to the east with the Portuguese, there were no seas unvisited. But allow me to tell our guests that also we, the Naus, the great potbellies of the north, played an important role in those discoveries. I, myself, the Santa Maria, previously named La Gallega, was the flagship on Columbus's voyage. And needless to say, the time they lost due to my torpidity and sluggishness when tacking was more than compensated by the cargo that you, the agile Caravels, were incapable of carrying.
You're right. You embarked more than 100 seamen, inhabitants of Palos and the neighboring Niebla, who for the very first time set sail towards the Indies, among whom stood out Don Martin Alonso Pinzon, proud and courageous man weathered in the ways of the sea, who, along with his brothers Francisco and Vicente Yañez, was the principal promoter of the charter. And And so, at the dawn of the 3rd day of August, men and ships set sail into the ocean through the Saltes Bar, and soon would caress the treasures of Khan, find El Dorado, and why not, maybe even find paradise on Earth. The southeast winds quickly took us to the Canary Islands, and there, on the island of La Gomera, ocean extension of the estate of Niebla, we were repaired. The Pinta, her broken rudder, and I, the Niña, my rigging. They replaced my lateen sail with a square mainsail, sign that the captain knew beforehand that we would be sailing astern. We left the Castilian Islands, carried along by the trade winds from the east, although until then no one had ventured so far west. Columbus did, although very much at the limit on 28 degrees north. We were lucky in that, although we must say in Christopher Columbus' honour, he and his men fixed, as of their first voyage to their particular Indies, the best route, going with few variants and, of course, returning without possibilities of improvement. Our seamen turned out to be long-suffering and experts. They could estimate nautical speed by simply observing the colour of the sea, the clouds, and the flight of birds. At the time, there existed no logs, chronometers, not even sextants, and the poorly magnetized floating needles of compasses were non-existent. The Admiral did not permit many calculations, seeing his daring and fearlessness compensated his evident shortcomings with the quadrant and astrolabe. However, we did not lack in minutely detailed astronomic measurements of the sun, the moon, and the constellations made by the expert pilots and masters who guided us. Pedro Alonso Miño, Juan de la Cosa, Ruiz de Gama, and Francisco Martin, who always seemed to be in the right place and never lost in that spotty sea famed for its catastrophes and calamities. Soon, we three witnessed that none of that happened during that great occasion.
Set on seeing only the seaman's mutiny and revenge on the Admiral, those who fabricated history forgot that few vessels in the world were as safe and had such a glorious outcome. The excellent skills that Martin Alonso displayed with his neighbours from Palau during the calms and the difficult, insecure moments of the Genovese dispelled all anxiety in those impressionable and excited anonymous minds that helped discover new lands. And it's high time we did away with once and for all those trite tales of sailors and criminals forced to embark against their will. No, they were surely good people, brave and capable, who, while being led by the Pinzones, knew how to face the ever-growing ocean that lay within the Admiral's head. A quarter of the real world was unexpectedly added to the one that in its day he had proposed from his imagination to wise men and kings.
The morning of the 12th of October, 1492, after 69 days, we sailed with heavy seas on a west-southwest course. The men, very tired from the long voyage, showed signs of restlessness upon seeing reeds and seagulls from the Nao, while those on the Pinta and those that I carried entertained themselves gathering sticks and pieces of cane which grow on land. 3 days, everyone was overjoyed, rubbing their eyes, trying to make out without a doubt that that whitish strip they saw was land. On 2 occasions, the impatience of the sentinels resulted in the admiral kneeling and intoning emotive and useless prayers, while the Pinta, who was more seafaring, made enough headway so that the lookout Juan Rodriguez Bermejo, forever remembered as Rodrigo de Triana, clamoured from the highest point of the mainsail the most marvellous shout imaginable. We quickly lied to until the following morning, when we arrived at an isle in the Bahamas that the Indians called Guanani. The admiral, his captains Martin Alonso and Vicente Yanez, and the expert in Oriental languages, jumped onto the land along with others who would give faith and testimony to the location of those lands and its people, in the name of the kings, having been carried out the great objective of the narrated exploit. From time immemorial, the extraordinary land barrier that divided the 2 great oceans had been awaiting this arrival. Their God had granted them the victory, and from that day on, Palos, La Rábida, Huelva, Moguer, Guanani, the Pinzon brothers, and the great Admiral Christopher Columbus would be names immortalized in the consciousness of all. We, the Caravels, have to still strike our sails after a last voyage on this dock that you are now visiting, precise image and reflection of that unique era. Here at La Rábida, gateway to the ocean, next to the monastery that bore silent witness to the strategies of the monks and explorers, next to the skies and water that awakened hope in the progress of mankind, we invoke the recognition of the glorious past in these places, and for its future protagonists and for its people, who form an Iberian-American brotherhood community, it would be, without a doubt, the best and most deserved inheritance that our heroic ancestors could receive.